After 2 episodes of featuring mixers, finally people are starting to have smaller, if not one-on-one dates, and with that comes some people potentially meeting their match, and more people just need to be cold and told they're not ready to love because clearly this is not the type of show for them. So let's break this down by the good, the bad, and then who gets eliminated. To start off, things are good for quite a lot of people this episode. Jeffrey and Demario go on a one-on-one date to a horse farm. She opens up about her life going on her uncle's farm before her parents' divorce. He catches on quickly in terms of riding horses, even better than Jeffrey at sometimes. And when he's approached about the idea of dating someone with children, he seems to make it seem like a highlight because that means she has financial and time management skills. So with that, Jeffrey is all in her feelings in a good way. Following up on those two, we have Sippy and Andre, who have perhaps the best date out of everyone because even though Andre is known to be a jokester, be very charming, and can perhaps give player vibes, he gives his complete and utter attention to Cynthia to the point where she really shows that she pretty much is why this show's been created. She opens up, she's vulnerable, even cries a little bit, and he does all the right things to make it seem that they could potentially be in game. Following them, anybody else have a solo date? No one else had a solo date. Oh, let's back up. Jonique and Lyndon had a solo date, but let me put it to you this way. Their solo date was cool, but when you compare it to Jeffrey and DeMario, Cynthia and Andre, it didn't really go where it needed to go. And there was also one more solo date, but we're going to get to that one on the bad side of things. Right now, we're sticking on to the positive. And Lyndon and Jonique, cool date. They seem like they can party together. I don't really think they'll be married or really loving on each other because it doesn't seem like it's in the stars for them. But getting to the group dates. Lyndon, Morgan, Marsha, and Tony go on a group date. And even though everybody seems to have interest in Morgan, and it's even noted that Morgan kind of curved Lyndon a little bit, Marsha's in the mix, and she and Lyndon's able to have something. She likes him perhaps more than he likes her, but he does go for a kiss, and while she does kind of pull back, at the same time, she does give him the grace for doing something a little bit too soon, and it doesn't kill her interest in him. Now, as for Morgan and Tony, she really does like Tony. The problem is with Morgan is she's never been in love, so you can tell she's a little bit cautious, and she's kind of wondering, with the way that the process works, who else is he like this with, or am I really this special as I think I am? And when it comes to Tony, we don't see any signs that he's really like pressing on to other women or anything like that. Yes, he had a little moment with Marsha in the last episode, or Marcia. I can't ever remember that woman's name. Either way, yes, those two had a moment, but he's barely checking for her when Morgan's around, so that should tell her a lot. Which leads to the last group date, which is Sue Ann and Blake, as well as Mark Anthony, Mercedes, and right now, Mercedes and Mark Anthony are at that point where as long as neither side says something stupid or does something stupid, they might be an in-game couple. But to much surprise, Sue Ann and Blake are also kind of cute together. He comes up with a nickname for her, Sue, in terms of something they can use whenever they're in an environment that, requires them to make a quick exit. And she appreciates, him putting in an effort in ways that some of the other ladies he clearly has not done. But whether or not that's going to keep him around to the end, that's hard to say, especially because some information comes up about him from Jeffrey, which made it seem that she was his endgame pick. And he doesn't want to stick around, have to wait until the end for them to be together, which, based off the way she makes it seem, he's a little bit too much for her and not in a positive way whatsoever. So Sue Ann wants to take him off her hands. That is fine with her. But that was a bit early into going into the bad stuff that happens because really there's only one bad date out of all the dates we see. And that's between Corvea and Fabrice. And that's pretty much because, well, Fabrice, Corvea, she started things off very light. They went on a bike ride together. She was very much admiring how he had a business for more than 10 years, sold it, and is living a very attractive lifestyle. And pretty much he paints her as a, I don't want to say little girl. He paints her as somebody who he could read like a book, and she doesn't appreciate that. She doesn't appreciate the idea of her seeming like the latest model of whatever he's used to dealing with versus a unique and individual person. And because of that, it seems between him saying that stuff to her and also his sexual comments that made a lot of the women uncomfortable, he ends up in the bottom two with, of course, Blake. Which leads us to the elimination portion, which has it where Blake's issues is that between him making comments to Jeffrey that makes everybody feel uncomfortable but Sue-Ann, and then Fabrice with all the comments he's made that has been very sexual or dismissive. Between the two, it's more of a lesser two evils thing, and a part of me really feels that if they could do a double elimination, the ladies might have done that. But since that's not possible, Fabrice ends up getting kicked, and Sue-Ann kind of asks some follow-up questions regarding the whole Jeffrey situation. And Blake does make some confessions about being very possessive, but he doesn't say that he's already chosen Jeffrey and validates all the claims that she has made thus far, which, as you can see from previews of the next episode, is going to be something that leads to a bit of drama, especially since it seems Sue-Ann is ready to take Blake's side over hearing out Jeffrey. The top highlight for us when it comes to this episode, and it's probably going to be the highlight for the season, is Cynthia. When it comes to Ready to Love, I think a lot of people have noted throughout the many seasons that it's an emotional and timing process. But I don't think we ever saw someone as open to the process and willing to find love as Cynthia has. To me, Ready to Love has often been ready to date. And also I would say for a lot of people, the attitude has been, I might as well try this since clearly what I'm doing isn't working. But even with that attitude, they're not truly trying to explore the options. Cynthia, on the other hand, I think she is what the show has often claimed to have wanted to cast and wanted to present when it comes to people's journeys. She is the epitome of why I think OWN keeps producing this show, and it's not to show a bunch of 30-plus-year-old black people making fools of themselves on television. It's to show you women like Cynthia and the few men, if we haven't seen them, that are like her, who want to find love, to be open, to be soft, to let their guard down, and change the narrative that, yes, finding love is going to be sometimes dramatic and lead to you having to shift through a lot of bullshit. But you will be able to find love, especially black love, and it is possible for you no matter if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, 50s, etc. It is a possible thing. And Ready to Love is, in the ideal world, one of the ways that you can find it. So the second highlight for us is just seeing a lot of good potential matches, and a lot of them rooted in people not only opening up as we saw with Cynthia, but also giving grace. Like, I want to take note of Marsha and how she handled Lyndon when it came to his kiss and her curving him. Her reassuring him and just making it clear that there was a misread signal, and him getting the grace to verbalize why he sometimes goes in too quickly. It's nice to see that we get a safe space for both men and women to have an honest conversation that with the wrong person can go very much left. And add on to that, I really appreciated the way DeMario handled Jeffrey when it came to her mentioning she has children, because while it wasn't depicted as something that could be a real vulnerable moment, at the same time, you have to recognize a lot of people, especially if you look on dating profiles and stuff like that, they mention that they don't want somebody with kids. So Jeffrey having, I think, 3 kids and DeMario having none, you can see why that's something she feels like she needs to mention just to check not only if he's aware of that, but whether or not he's down for that, considering because things are going so well. So him handling that as he did, how Marcia handled Lyndon's moment of mishap, add in how clearly Mark Anthony and Mercedes are definitely going to be a thing because you saw where his hand was at, right? It just makes you think that this might be one of the first seasons in quite a long time where it's less of a question of, are we going to get 3 final couples? And more so a question of, may we finally get it where multiple people besides the final 3 actually are in relationships, never mind relationships that could last past the union, where usually things break down and get very dramatic. So the on-offense topic for us is going to be the drama that's on the way, because clearly this show couldn't keep things on a high note with it's people finding love and maybe having some disagreements, but not letting that become a thing. But unfortunately, as we've seen between the Jeffrey, Blake, and Sue situation, people are going to start taking sides and it's going to start becoming an issue. Now, how big of an issue is hard to say, because we know there's also going to be Tony versus Lyndon when it comes to Morgan's affections. So this is pretty much either the first major fight or else a warm-up for that one. But either way, I think, or rather I hope, that if we're going to go to the usual drama that this show produces, hopefully it balances things out so it's not all about these grown-ass people having drama in their life, adding on to whatever baggage they already came in with, but instead people really finding love to the point we don't have to have Rashid and Simone have this grand thing on the camera just to remind us that, hey, this show does occasionally do what it's supposed to do. So in terms of who we see in the bottom 2 for future episodes and the endgame couples, bottom 2 for men feels like, to me, it's definitely gonna be Blake, and I want to say either Blue or Anthony, but that's just because thus far they had this Sue treatment where you don't really get to see them or even know if they're matching with anybody. So with that in mind, you're like, okay, maybe they're next up. But as for who is going to actually get eliminated, I can't see Sue being able to fight for Blake hard enough to keep him from getting kicked. So more than likely, this is probably going to be his last save unless one of the other guys does something so stupid that they can do like Fabrice and find themselves at the bottom. As for the woman in the bottom 2, honestly, I'm still surprised Corvée is still around. Any man that she really talks to seems to have an initial interest, but then it drops quickly because of something she says or how she reacts to something. And I'm not saying that she's the problem. I'm saying more so that this is not the type of show for her at this point. As for who could be in the bottom with her, honestly, a part of me thinks Cynthia could be in the bottom, and not because she's a bad match for this show, but more so because her focus is so on Andre early on in this show that could easily lead the other man thinking, I didn't get a chance, so she can get kicked off because I deserve to have gotten some time too. Which could be why Andre and the rest of them are fighting over who gets that last chance thing in the next episode, but who knows who that could have gone to. We'll find out in the next episode on Friday. Which leads to the endgame couples. Right now, I think Mark Anthony and Mercedes have an endgame couple vibe. Tony and Morgan, as long as Tony handles his other relationships in a way that doesn't give Morgan major red flags. And Cynthia and Andre, again, if Andre doesn't handle his other relationships or situationships, whatever you want to call them, in a way that makes Cynthia uncomfortable and perhaps feeling like he's two-timing her.